Hello, leaders. It's Arlene Smith, and welcome back. I'm super excited about today's podcast and my guest host, Veronica Barber. And in a minute, I'm going to have her introduce herself. You all remember her from the Healing the Hearts of Healthcare podcast, where she is sort of my guru when it comes to emotional intelligence. And you know, as a leader, this is so incredibly important for us when we're leading our teams, and especially leading our teams through the great sadness and pushing themselves forward into doing the work they were designed to do every day. This really is so important. It matters. So, Veronica, let's start by just refreshing our audiences again about your background. And I think you're just brilliant. I love working with you. I could work with you every single day, and I used to love when we worked together as consultants. But just refresh everybody, just so they can remember.
So real quickly, I've worked in the sort of aging and acute care fields most of my career, and sort of started off when I was 18 getting licensed, not certified, I should say certified, not licensed, as a nursing home assistant. Did that all throughout college, post-college, and actually all settings, nursing home, hospital, home care. And my career sort of professional path took me down towards being a nursing home administrator. So I did that for quite some time, worked at that C-suite level as a chief operating officer for a large health system for, I think, about 12, 13 years. And during that time, I really shifted my gear towards more of the people services end of the business, where I started to shift more to do more work in the HR space, just because I was finding that we had a lot of needs, right? We're wonderful caring for the people that we serve. We're not always wonderful caring about the people we employ. And so really my sort of passion, I noticed, was really shifting towards the people we were employing. And that sort of lent itself to me becoming a consultant. That's where I was able to meet Arlene at one point in my career. We've been friends ever since. And lent itself to me going down that path of being an executive coach, which I thoroughly enjoy doing, learning more about emotional intelligence during that journey. I have a doctorate in executive leadership. I actually teach full time at a university in addition to continuing with my consulting and coaching work.
I love it. And I think that the one thing that I really appreciate about you, Veronica, is just your approach always naturally makes people feel just so relaxed and so calm. And I think that's what makes you so incredibly special here on your journey in life school. Like that is your superpower. And I wish in healthcare, every leader had that ability. And that's why I really wanted to have you back on for leadership. You had to get through all your exams and finals and everything like that before we could get together, which I appreciate that you did that. I think that's wonderful. But I thought maybe we could start off the podcast talking about what I see so much when it comes to leadership right now in the field of healthcare, which is it is becoming much more difficult for leaders to really stay focused, get the work that they need to get done and accomplished, which, part of that is they're supposed to be interacting with the people that they serve, better understanding their needs to be able to support them, and doing all that important sort of leadership work with all of this activity that's happening around us. And you think about it in terms of like peer leadership, right? Like there's a lot of drama happening here. I'm being pulled into this drama here. And so many times I see as leaders, people get sucked into that and then they get stuck. And then what they find is they end their week and they've gotten very little done, which you know how that feels when you're a leader. You get nothing done. You're like, I cannot continue to do this. Right now, I'm working over the weekend. I'm trying to catch up. But let's just talk about that a little bit. Like, because I think even just from an emotional intelligence perspective, there's so many things that we can learn from us as human beings. It's just like how we can better prepare to protect ourselves so that we can still lead people effectively. We can still get the work done that we're supposed to get done, but we're doing it from a place where we're protecting our time and we're protecting our energy and like our ability to be distracted. Like I always feel like in this modern day and age, you know that.
Yeah. And, you initially brought me to a story years ago where I had a vice president she was almost angry with me, sort of borderline yelling at me. I remember her saying to me, "You don't have any emotions." And I just listened, and I don't think I understood it at the time. But to your point, I navigated everything with such ease and a level of calmness, a level of peace. And I don't think I realized it at the time. It was really coming from a place of being emotionally intelligent. I
Mm,
never lost control. I never got angry. I never got anxious. I was always really just comfortable in adversity, in moments where I didn't have the answers, in during moments where people were really struggling. I didn't necessarily take on other people's emotions. I didn't take on other people's problems. I didn't know it at the time. I was doing a lot of the right things. Nobody taught me. I think I was just lucky that just intuitively that was just how I functioned. Years later, I understood it for what it was. And there's so many parts of this we can unpack. But the one thing that comes to mind is two terms. One is called emotional contagion. And so our emotions are a primary filter for us. Everything we see, we hear, we do is being filtered through our emotions. They're chemicals flowing through our bodies. But the other piece we don't always think about with regard to emotions is they emit these electrical charges, either positive or negative. So we can think of ourselves as these sort of tuning forks in which we are constantly emitting these electrical charges and we're constantly receiving from other people their electrical charges. And I always feel and I'm sure there's been a lot of research on this. I've just never paid attention to it, but if you looked at the percentage of people that go into any type of human service sector, they're probably pretty empathetic people to begin with. And probably a huge portion of them would be even that heightened level of empathy where we say empaths.
yep.
So they're naturally feeling so much deeper. They're naturally connecting on an emotional level. And what happens, particularly when you're really good at connecting on an emotional level, you're really bad at blocking it out.
Yeah.
And so,
a
and
100%.
yeah, and empathy is such a critical skill set and competency that we need in any field. But I always say, particularly in the field that we're in,
Mm,
empathy is, if you said I could do away with how many 8 out of 10 skill sets. What are the 2 that I must keep? Empathy is always going to be one of those 2,
mm,
right? So we need empathy. We need to have that moment that we could sit in that space with that person. We could connect not only on an intellectual level, a cognitive level, but also connect on an emotional level. What are they feeling? What's this experience like for them? We can't do our jobs well if we don't allow ourselves to go there.
right.
But we have to then learn how to not stay there. We have to then release it. I remember at a certain point in my life, and I do this with my coaching clients quite a bit, but I had to learn ways to sort of insulate myself, right? Sort of have a bubble of protection so that I could really feel in that moment what they were feeling, but then I could put my shield up and I could release that feeling so that it wasn't just staying with me and lingering with me. And if you think about all the people we come in contact with, from the people we serve to the people we employ to the family members and the, vendors and all the people we're engaging with throughout the day. If I take on all that they're sending, right? And I'm just constantly receiving it, I can't, right? It's just pulling from me and it's just so heavy. So I need to find ways to release it. I need to find ways to let it go. I need to find ways to shield myself from it. And there's lots of ways we can get there, but in essence, it's developing your emotional intelligence, developing your self-awareness and your self-regulation so that you can be able to do that and not hold on to it.
Yeah, and I think it's just particularly hard for so many people right now because really, if you look at our world, right, I constantly say this. I was just educating yesterday and through the evening and the night shift, and I remember saying to people, one of the things I really want you to remember is that, look at our world and look at the way people are responding and reacting to one another, right? A lot of people are being activated through an emotional response over silly little things, right? And so when you're exposed to that, when your patients are exposed to that, when their families are exposed to that, when you're exposed to that, when your coworkers, like everybody's exposed to that, right? It becomes almost sort of part of the way we work. And that it's very natural and that it's okay. And that, you know, people just don't see how that it really affects healing. And that's the piece that I really want healthcare workers to zero in on. It all affects healing, right? The way we respond, react, the way when we're interacting, it can either have a positive impact or it certainly can have a negative impact. And I don't think we educate enough on that, like the ability of us and our surroundings and how we're exposed to things, and then how that affects the way we're interacting with our patients, and really how that affects their ability to heal another person by using their superpower.
Yeah, yeah. And I think it goes to, and I know you probably came up with this. I recall the organization we both
Yeah.
were working with at the time, but there would always be this phrase of, you can think of yourself as, you know, I always think of the gas tank, right? In order to have the energy to continue, we need our gas tank to be full. It can't be depleted. It can't be empty. So we have to be really mindful of what do we need to keep our gas tank full so that we can get through the day.
Yeah.
Um, and this is part of that emotional intelligence of understanding what are the things that deplete us. And lots of times things are depleting us and they're happening really in a non conscious way. We're not even aware of it. So we need to take the time and we need to build more mindful practices in so that we can gain that awareness. And then we need to really be in that observant mode to be able to understand and identify, well, now that we know the things that deplete us, what are the things we can do to counteract that depletion? What are the things that we need to fill us back up? I actually was having a conversation with a few students the last couple of weeks because, we always talk about this concept of people that are extroverted versus introverted, and, Arlene, I know you have an extroverted nature, and
Right.
obviously I do as well. And so extroverts are fueled by people.
Oh, yeah.
The more I'm around people, the more I'm talking with people, I'm just getting more, my gas tank is just filling up, right? It's fueling me, it's motivating me. I think out loud, I process out loud. I do my best work when I'm talking with others.
Mhm.
But
Same.
man, more than close to 50%, at least half of the population is more on the introverted side of the spectrum. And when we do what we do best that fuels us, we're actually draining that other group of people, right? They need solitude. They
Yeah.
need just a couple people once in a while to engage with. So the more that we understand what we need, and I think when we talk about leadership, and this is the conversation I was just having with a couple of different people that are very introverted. And, when they're looking at their goals of continuing that career path, they see that the more extroverted leaders tend to get promoted, right?
Right.
And they start to say, well, I have to be more extroverted. And that's not the answer. What
Exactly.
fuels them is to solidly be in doing those introverted things that give them the energy and the motivation to continue. But can they be more aware of their interpersonal skills and how they're engaging with others, right? And how they're being perceived, how they're being impacted. So those are skills they can develop. But it doesn't mean that we walk away from the essence of who we are and that we stop doing the things that we need that are fortifying for us.
Yeah. So, so true. And it just takes me right back to sort of some of the great mentors that I had over the course of my career when I was learning in leadership, and how it was this constant reminder that they sort of placed in my mind, which was, look at your entire team, not just the people that you're naturally drawn to, right? Because it's easier for us as leaders to shift and drift towards the people that are like us. But true leadership is our ability to be able to reach inside of anybody and to really make a connection with them, right? And to find out what they do really well and encourage them and inspire them and challenge them to think about ways that they can stretch and grow and just become better at that, right? And it wasn't until I had those moments where I took and I put that same emphasis that I did on my extroverts to that exact same emphasis that I did on my introverts, where I really saw that, true leadership is your ability to do that, do it well. You can take the entire team to a higher level, right? Literally by just the way you're changing your mind and the way you're looking at your teams.
And I think, that you're really speaking to that strength-based approach, right? When we understand that diversity is far better than homogeneity,
Right.
you know,
Right.
when we really start to see people for their gifts and their strengths. And then when we can, as a team, in that collective sense, leverage their strengths. Um, the way we get there is we start to pay attention because we're naturally drawn in a very biased way to people that are like us.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
we have to get curious and get interested in noticing all those differences and
Right.
get just as excited about understanding the differences. And, as we do that, people start to become their authentic selves. And I think a lot of this conversation also ties into the concept of psychological safety.
Yes.
When I go to an organization and I'm sort of told this is a job, this is the culture, just assimilate, you
Right.
know, this is what's going to get you a good performance review. This is what's going to keep me happy as your boss. If I'm told just to assimilate, I become a shell of myself.
Exactly.
If I'm told, we've chosen you to add to the value that we have in this organization, we want your whole self to show us how we can get the additive nature of what you bring. you know and we have to be open to it. We have to be open to it, and we have to embrace it. And part of that psychological safety is helping everyone to feel really comfortable with being their authentic selves, so that they can really say what they're thinking. They can be able to ask for help when they need it, and
Yeah.
they're without fear of being judged or being, criticized, where they can really speak up and, really challenge the status quo at times. So, so much of this is, as a leader, are you creating a safe environment for people to really be seen, for people to really be their authentic selves? And as this topic of healing and emotional intelligence, are you creating the space for people to really learn who they are and to really learn what they need? Um, I don't think we spend enough time doing that. So much of my experience in the healthcare, aging services space was always focused on the needs of the people we were serving.
Right.
And I think that's why I started and you shifted.
Right.
Maybe it comes from wisdom and age, but I started to realize that we needed to spend maybe even more time focused on the people we were employing than the people we were serving, that one really needed to come before the other.
I wish that everybody in the world in healthcare could have heard that last sentence,
Mm,
because I think it's so compelling, right? When you think about what we see currently, right, in this post-COVID workforce and all of the challenges that we see in healthcare, right? Everybody just has this natural sort of craving to want to go back to the old ways of working. That's not possible, right? So we
Mhm.
have to teach people, like, how do we move forward? But how do we move forward and teach our employees in a world where, it's full of challenges and stress and pain and burden and struggle that they're experiencing in their own personal lives, and they also come into the workplace and they have those exact same different types of experiences, right? And then we still want you to use that superpower and to still heal people and heal them well every single time. And that's full of challenges, right? It's really a focus and a shift that has to be done by leaders engaging with their team members in a way to understand how best to support that one person. Just like we provide person-centered care, and we're not, we're all unique individuals, and we have to learn, the preferences and the needs and the wants of those individuals and integrate that in the way we do care delivery. It's the same with leadership. Like, every single person is unique, and when we think about that from that lens of emotional intelligence, like, what sort of speaks to you in terms of, like, what leaders really need to embrace, like, in terms of their mindset and the way they're going to approach those types of situations?
It I'm still stuck on something you said earlier, so
Ah, go back. It doesn't
let
matter.
me I think there's so much that we could speak to with this, but there's something that just really struck me based on what you said in the last, few sentences. But when I think about this area of research about happiness and the work that a lot of researchers have done in terms of positive psychology, one of the things that we know, which I don't think we ever really realized until really the last decade as we're understanding this more, is we have to be able to sit with our emotions.
Hmm.
We have to be able to experience sadness, experience anxiety. Often we're going about life so quickly and we have some sort of negative emotion that we're feeling and we want to push it away, and we just say, well, we should be able to do this, get better, it shouldn't affect us this much, right? I've been a hospice nurse for how many years? It shouldn't affect me, I should be able to do this, right? um, but what we know now through research is that if we don't sit in that space and hold that space and feel that emotion, we're not able to release it. It stays with us. I always think of, the analogy of if I'm smoking cigarettes, I'm inhaling nicotine. That darkness, if you look at those lung scans, right? X-ray scans, if you look at the dark spots on the lungs, I feel like, the metaphor that I give is every time we don't address our emotions and the feelings that we're having and don't allow ourselves to feel them, the darkness stays in us. We have to
Yeah,
release it. So what we know now is it's okay to hold on to it. It's okay to have those moments to sit with it. And I think in healthcare we do a semi okay job for some things. When somebody passes away, we take that moment to feel it,
right,
right? And so everybody, for the most part could connect with that. But what about all those other moments? We
right,
just had a really angry family member who just gave us a really hard time because that family member wasn't dealing well with the inevitability of what was happening with their loved one.
right,
And so we took it on. We took it on. But we didn't take the moment to process it ourselves.
right.
We dealt with the situation. Now we have to run down the hall and deal with the next situation. And then there's three things we have to get done in the next hour, right? So we go from thing to thing to thing. We don't take a moment, right, to just accept it, feel it, process it.
I
So,
agree.
from a leader standpoint, how do we create a culture that supports that? I worked for an organization, one of the last organizations I worked for, one of the policies that we put in place was that all you had, and I forget what the word was, but all you had to say was, I need a moment. And the commitment organizationally was somebody would take over whatever you were doing in that moment.
I love that.
right? So you could get away. You could go for a walk outside and it was the goal was you had 15 minutes to yourself just to walk away from that situation.
Right.
And we stepped in before it escalated, right? But how do we build a culture that does that? The other concept that comes to mind is a concept called anti-fragility. You know, we always talk about resilience. So resilience is, can I bounce back,
Right.
right? I have something hard, can I bounce back? Anti-fragility is really about, I don't know, only bounce back. You know, if I squeeze one of those, those balls that they shrink, you could squeeze them and then
Stretch balls or
you
what.
let them go and they pop right back to the original size, right? Um, Anti-fragility says, I'm not only going to bounce back, but I bounce back better,
Mm.
right? I respond better. So I have more resilience, not just that I get back to my original state. And what we know that helps us to do that, and I'll use the example which a lot of researchers will use, is as human beings, we are anti-fragile, you know, beings.
Mhm.
And we can think of this in terms of if you go to the gym and you lift weights. It's really hard, right? It hurts. It doesn't feel that pleasant. You do those repetitions, and eventually you get stronger muscles. Your muscles grow. However, what we all know about weightlifting, which I clearly don't do it enough and I need to do more, what we all know about weightlifting is it's not something you can do continuously.
Right.
You have to take a break. And a lot of weightlifters will do their legs one day and they don't even come back to their legs until like day 3 or day 4, right? They do different body parts and then they give their body parts rest time. So what we know about anti-fragility is what we need is those moments of rest. We need recovery time. So if we took that concept into healthcare and we talked about all those moments, right? Where we're running around like crazy, we've got one thing after another. We have to build moments of recovery throughout the day.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that could be just getting to take a walk. That could be some mindfulness practice. What we've seen is that recovery can happen really fast. It doesn't have to be a 15, 20, 30-minute activity. It could be a 2-minute
Right.
thing, a mindfulness practice.
Right.
So when I think of leadership, how do we navigate what has only gotten harder, faster, more intense, the work that we do? Um, we have to hold the space for those emotions, to release them, to feel them. And we have to have lots of moments of recovery throughout the day so that we can continue to build this sort of, the anti-fragility is often called resilience 2.0. So
Yeah.
we can get to this new level of being able to navigate a really, really tough world.
Right. And I think, I mean, wouldn't you agree that the purpose of really developing those skills, right, in terms of like your leadership competencies and your ability to do that? I mean, I want to believe that the purpose for us to do that is that we get better at enjoying the moments that we have with the people that we serve and those experiences. I feel like in healthcare everyone is moving 1,000 miles a minute, right? And so in that kind of a day-to-day environment, we miss the moments to find those tiny little opportunities where joy is setting in, or we have the ability to change someone's life just by one thing that we say to them or one way we respond to them that can really then they can take that in and that can propel them forward. And I feel like that's where I want to believe the deep work has to happen. Like the work has to happen so that we can get to a place where leaders just realize it's not just about attending meetings, right, writing reports and having conversations with people, but it's about in those moments of recovery, you're experiencing those joyful moments as part of the important work that you're doing here in life school.
Yeah, yeah. The more moments that you take, the stronger you become, right?
Mm.
So you can handle more. I was coaching somebody. just yesterday, in fact. And because she was dealing with these really difficult parts of her life, this unexpected thing that happened this month that really required a huge investment of sort of social emotional capacity, she was like, I wouldn't have had the reserves that I had these last few weeks had I not, right, been able to deal with that other stuff, had I
Mm,
not dealt with that other stuff. But
mm,
because she was at a different point in a different place, she had the reserves to get through these really unexpected few weeks that she was faced with. And, to me, that's such a great example of what we need in healthcare is how do we ensure that we constantly have the reserves so that we can get through those moments. Those moments are always going to be here in this field.
right,
It's the nature of the beast in many ways. Now, from a leadership standpoint, there's a lot leaders can do to mitigate that, but it never totally takes it away, you
correct.
know.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think, the more that I think about this as what I've always believed in my life is that if you are given the opportunity to be a leader in this world because of your skills and your talents and your gifts, it truly is a duty and a responsibility. And with that comes great responsibility because every single day you interact with another human being and you're doing it in an authoritarian way, right? They see you as authority. And
Mhm.
so that is why it's so, so, so important to think about the how and how we can get better at really being attuned with our own emotions and the emotions of our team members, right? Because this, you've probably seen this just as much as I have. Like, you know, people do things and they lack that ability to be self-aware in the
Yeah.
moment. That could happen with a teammate and it could happen with the leader, right? And so that's why it's so incredibly important to kind of bring an emphasis on this is your responsibility as a leader. This is one of those sort of core competencies that you got to get better at really just understanding what that means.
And I think of it as cause and effect, right? The words that we say, how we say them, how we behave creates the effect, right? Our intent is never the same as our impact. And so, how do we build that self awareness? But going back to what I said earlier with regard to kind of emotional contagion, the cause and effect on a whole non-conscious level, right? When I'm feeling anxious as a leader, when I'm feeling angry, when I'm feeling frustrated, all of those emotions I'm feeling, I'm also sending out there and people are receiving them and taking them in. So it's not only my verbals and my behaviors and the way that I handle the situation on a non-conscious, unconscious level, I'm sending out all these electrical charges. So people are getting like a double whammy, right? They're seeing it and experiencing it, but then they're feeling it in an unconscious way that's also impacting how they're perceiving. I love the story. I share this all the time. This is before the research even, it wasn't even done in terms of emotional intelligence, but there were 10 babies that were placed in a room. One baby started crying. Within less than a minute, all 10 babies were crying. And what we know now, years later, right, is this whole concept of emotional contagion, where, we're so impacted by what's going on around us. Those babies, they didn't have language skills yet, right? They're at the very beginning of their sort of developmental phase, but they heard crying, but more so, it wasn't so much that they heard it, it was that they sensed it. And their natural reaction was to cry as well.
Oh,
And that's what we're doing to our people,
yeah.
right? It's not even our words. Our words are only 50% of the equation. We feel that anxiety, we feel that anger, we feel that frustration. We internalize it on a non-conscious basis and we internalize it on a cognitive and emotional basis because we start to say, we messed up. We're not good enough. We're not doing fast enough, right? We take it all in. We take it all in.
And
And
then
it
for
just
our
does
team members,
damage.
yeah, when you think about it from the perspective of our team members, then they turn around and then they
Send
deliver
it out.
and send it back out, right? Which absolutely 100% affects healing, right? And it affects, you know, pretty much the way people have the experience. And I say this as much as I can in every education setting with direct care staff and healthcare workers. Like we have to really come to this realization that people are not coming to us in their best state, right? It's not like they're coming to the spa for 2 weeks and they're going to be on vacation, and they're going to have a glorious time, right? They're not well, they're sick, they need healing, and this is the last place they want to be, right? And so let alone all the stuff that's happening in their personal lives that none of us have any idea of, nor will we ever really truly understand. And so, from that perspective, all of that is sort of pushed onto the healthcare worker, right? Without them even having a realization that it's even happening. So, that's something that I'm really curious about is how do we do a better job teaching that, like just through self-reflection. And I know for me, I'm always teaching about, working from that place of empathy and just really imagining it to be the person that you love, tomorrow is in that situation. And, that is exactly what your family members are dealing with. And it should be no surprise to us as healthcare workers that we are going to get blowback from that because nothing in healthcare goes perfect. Even in the best institutions, there's still things that are unpredictable that are going to happen that were unanticipated and unexpected.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's interesting because there's sort of two different schools of thought. One is the way we grow empathy as we get people to look outside of themselves to really try to understand other people's situations, make that connection. Another school of thought is I can't be empathetic towards anyone until my basic needs are being met.
Yeah.
So, I guess I'm really torn because I tend to say, well, you need to do both at the same time.
Agree,
um,
100%.
because, and that's where I think my, real sort of direction and passion shifted mid-career because I really just started to be so concerned for the people we employed
Yeah,
that we were not meeting their needs. And if we weren't healing them first, right? If we weren't attending to them, you think of it as attending to a garden.
right.
That garden will never grow and be fruitful unless we've tended to the garden and we've taken care of the soil. Our
Mm.
people are our soil. And we have to start there. At the same time, we can build self-awareness, we can build empathy, mindsets and skill sets. And I think a lot of that is it comes down to two things. One is an organizational culture,
Mhm.
right? Where it's just a natural part of the culture and we've created the conditions so that it is a natural part of the culture. And there's a lot of things we have to do really, really intentionally to build that type of culture. But the other part is just basic education, training, self awareness. So we can do those things, but I think we have a higher calling. If any of us who are called, as you said, and I think this is the key difference when it comes to empathy, um, we're not trying to give good customer service and working at McDonald's or working, at CVS, right? Where we have customers that we cash out, right? We're caring for people at the end of their life where they were sick, they're in pain, they're confused, they're struggling with death, right? The imminency of what's coming next. They're struggling with loss and disability and disease. We are here to serve people that are in many ways at the hardest, lowest points of their journey.
Right,
At least sometimes that's how it's seen. Other people would say it's at the highest, most beautiful part of their journey, right? But the majority of people don't see it that way.
right,
And so our sort of calling, our gift, right, is to care for, care with, support, um, be be one with, be at peace with. how could we ever give that gift if we haven't gotten the gift first? If we don't have, you know, you go back to the plane example of you got to take the oxygen first before you give it to others. I think our calling as leaders in this field, more so than any other fields out there, other than maybe some other human service fields, our calling as a leader is to care deeply for the people that we employ
Yes.
and to make sure that they are whole, right? That they are fueled, that they are fortified in ways that then enable them to be able to give back and to give to others. But if we don't start there, from the way that we hire, from the way that we onboard, to the way that we train, to the way that we support, we're missing a critical element
Yeah.
of what, we need to be doing as a leader.
Yeah.
I think organizations could, for 1 year, stop focusing on every single goal that they have, other than maybe some quality regulatory things that they better not take their eyes off of.
And some finances too, right? Because we
Couple,
were just
well,
saying that.
eventually, but you know what? Even finances, I got to tell you, in all the years that I worked in a C-suite executive capacity, finances for me were a byproduct of doing all the right things.
Always, yeah.
So I was never focused on the finances. I mean, you can't spend money foolishly,
Yeah.
but I put all of my energy into making sure we were doing the right things and we were asking the right questions.
Yeah.
Um, and if we just stopped, if we just put a hold on all the big aspirational things we wanted to do, and we said, this coming year, we're gonna take C for caring, and we're gonna live it fully. We're
Mhm.
gonna live it fully. And we're gonna envision what that caring word truly looks like, you know, as team members, as individuals who work in the organization, as care partners. Um, we're gonna really just focus on that. Nothing else. Let's just focus on that.
I love that. I think that's a great idea. I mean, it just reminds me when I do like nursing education. I used to focus on these sort of three C's, right? And so it was, what are we going to commit to? What are we going to communicate? And how are we going to show that this is linked to care? And I do love that, right? I love that idea of like just connecting it back to the person. And I also, I was just thinking about this. I was telling my sister before this podcast, we were having a conversation on the drive up, and I was telling her about the education that I was doing over the weekend, over this week. And I was saying, I always end every in service that I do with staff, to just, give them just lots and lots of gratitude just for the hard work that
Yeah.
they do.
Yeah.
I really just allow that to be an opportunity where I pour it out of my heart and my soul so they can really feel it, right? And so, I was doing this in service for the night shift, and I was saying to somebody, I know that we're ending the in service, but before we do that, I just want to say, if you don't hear it enough, and I know you don't hear it enough, because I know in healthcare we don't give it enough, but thank you for everything you do, because I know that you choose to do this work every single day, even though it's difficult and it's full of challenges. You're coming back and you're doing it well, and you're using this superpower that you were given in this world, in life school, to heal people and to make their lives better when they really need it. And not everybody can do that, and you do it, and you're still working at it, and you're coming back, and you're doing it for, you're doing it extremely well. And I had this person say to me, she literally turned her head and she was like, no one has ever said that to me in my whole career. And I was like,
Wow.
right, that was that moment, like
Mm.
that realization that, again, I think a lot of this, when we think about healing the hearts of the healthcare workers, right? So from those experiences that they go through every single day, leaders, it's truly a call to action for them to say, I have to, as a leader, learn different ways and practices
Yeah.
to engage with the workforce so that I can get them to a place where they're doing the work they were designed to do here in life school, and they can still realize that they have the support and that's coming from me, and they're filled up at the end of every day, and that is from my actions, right? So it was literally like, 15 seconds of words, but it made an impact. And that's what I want leaders to really understand. It's the more you do it, the better you're going to be at it, right? And the more natural you can get at it, where you're really just focusing on the conversations and just recognizing that this is such hard work.
And I feel like, and I'm just going back to my experience as a nursing home administrator, early in my career, I was taught, we talk about management by walking around, right? And I was taught that you need to do rounds once or twice a day. And the whole focus around was to identify the things you see that need to be fixed,
Right.
right? There's something on the floor, it's an unsafe situation. Is the medicine cart
Right.
locked,
Right.
right? Um, does the pudding, is it in a bowl of ice? Is it
Right.
chilled, right? Whatever it is, is there patient information that's
Right.
obvious, so that was the first thing I was taught. I mean, when I go back to, wow, like what bad lessons when I know things have gotten better. And now we've sort of said to administrators as they're learning how to be administrators, yes, do your rounds, but focus more on the right things you're seeing. What's happening that's good, that's happening, what's right. What if we now took it to the third level up that said, focus on the healing, focus on the caring,
Right.
right? So, yes,
Would change
think
healthcare.
about it. How do we just keep elevating it and ascending in a way? Um, and I think I've shared this story with you before, but it was one of our psych nurses that said to me years ago, she's like, I want to start a group once a week with 4 people. It was our in the old days, we said our dementia units, right?
Right.
Memory care units. And she says, I just want to do 4 people with the same 4 people every week. And so it was like, say, Thursday at 4 o'clock every day. She goes, and I want to be consistent. She's like, holidays, no matter what it is, we will meet consistently every Thursday, say at 4 o'clock. And I was, of course, like, definitely. And that soon became my most meaningful part of my week. I'm this chief operating officer. I spend all day in meetings and there's so much stuff you have to do. And I started to look forward to my Thursdays from 4 to 5. And 4 to 5 ended up going to like 5:30 afterwards because I would just hang on the memory care unit. I
Mm.
would just visit and I would just hang out with people that were working there. And it was the first time in all the years that I really had consistent, um, a relaxed state of just being,
Yeah.
right? Of just being present, of just getting to know people. And, we go through our jobs as leaders. And, I remember one leader saying she sort of had these little check boxes in her head. Okay, I had a 3-minute conversation with that person. Oh, good, check,
Right.
right? I took the time, I walked slowly in the hallway and I met with this family member. Check, good,
Right.
right? That's not enough. That's
Mm.
not enough. Those little moments, yeah, they're nice. They're not fortifying enough. They have to happen more often. That person that you said thank you to think that's the first time she ever heard it,
Right.
right? I mean, in some ways, it's so sad.
Right.
In other ways, the gift that you gave her in that moment, that one moment, was powerful. But
Yeah.
how do we give that gift continuously? You know, how do we just continuously fortify people and give them what they need to be successful? As leaders, we have to spend less time in meetings. We have to teach all the people we work with to spend less time in meetings, you
Yeah.
know, or, if they are meetings, change the way the meetings are done. So
Yeah.
they're much more fortifying,
Yeah,
you know?
and they're productive and they're efficient and they're effective. I mean, I
Yeah.
see this so many times in organizations, right? That people will have meetings and people don't come prepared, right? And so that meeting that could have been done in 20 minutes had everybody come armed with the information so that it was like really efficient and effective, has stretched out to an hour and a half because people have to look things up and do things. So
Yeah.
some of
Yeah.
that is setting the expectations and making sure that everybody's working from that same frame of reference. I know for me, when I educate, I always say to especially new people, like when I work with new educators, I'm always saying to them, like, you have to treat your time as the most precious commodity.
Yeah.
Like, you're
Absolutely.
learning and you're growing, and you're not going to know where everything is and how to put your hands on something. So if it takes you more than 15 minutes to do something, to search for something and look for it, pick up the phone and call me, right? That's I can tell you exactly in a second where that's going to be and how to put your hands on it. So many times I see people, they get into poor habits where they're afraid to ask, like you said, like, I'm afraid, I don't want somebody to know that I don't know what I'm doing, and I'd rather spend an hour or an hour and a half trying to search and search and search to find the resource
Yeah.
or the tools that I need. And so we've got to shift that when it comes to leadership, to really make those reminders and integrate them into our daily practices of like, no, this is, treat your time as the most important commodity,
Yeah.
because in all of those extra moments, that's where we want you to focus all your attention and that compassion and that, that those sending out those feelings of love and just care, really
Yeah.
good care, because that's how it's going to change the way people heal,
Yeah.
right?
So true.
Yeah. So what would you like, what's your best piece of advice that you would give to a leader that's like, been listening to the podcast and really just thinking about like emotional intelligence and just like how much bigger and broader like this is, like we said, like how
Hmm.
can we get it to that next phase? Like, are there a couple pearls of wisdoms that you would say to people? Like these are in your must-have columns, not your nice
Yeah.
to haves, right? These are in the must. You must have, be able to do these couple of things. What would you
Yeah.
say?
Um, and of course, I never answer your question initially. So
Oh,
the must have for me is you just like we have all of the trainings that we have in long-term care and aging services and healthcare. What we know now is that many industries, many large organizations have placed building emotional intelligence competencies is critical.
yes.
And we see that the return on investment, in terms of whether it's profitability or turnover or employee satisfaction, effectiveness, right? That return on investment is so high.
Mhm,
And so, what I would say is a must have is organizations have got to start developing this competency.
mhm,
Start with their leaders and then slowly build it throughout the organization. But the other thing I would say is a must have for anybody in a leadership position, you have to build some mindful practices so that you're really having those reflective moments yourself. So you're building your self awareness. And self awareness has an internal component and an external component. So self awareness from an internal component is I'm going to maybe journal, I'm going to do some mindfulness practices, I'm going to really start to understand why I do what I do, when I do what I do, what's behind it. So I'm going to build that awareness. But the external part of self awareness is really engaging in activities by which people can give you the feedback that you need. You
oh,
know, all too often, leaders are never told the stuff they need to know because everybody's so uncomfortable telling them.
right.
So practices such as getting comfortable with 360 reviews, and really engaging. Now, I have a lot of issues with 360s
Me too.
when they're done wrong and
And
they're
they're
not
done
done
wrong.
right. But
Exactly.
when they're done right, they're
Right.
so incredibly helpful.
Powerful.
But how do you build that ongoing practice? I always go back to Mayor Walsh from New York City from many moons ago. He would constantly be on the New York subways, hanging out in corners of some of the big streets in New York. And he would be saying to the people who live in the city as the mayor, he'd be like, "How am I doing?" His
Right,
big question is, "How am I doing?" And, so we can turn that in from a leadership standpoint. And I love the looking at it in terms of three prongs. What do you like from me that you're seeing that you want to see more of, right? What do you want me to continue doing? What do you want me to do differently or stop doing? you know,
right.
and sometimes when you say to people, "Can you give me some feedback?" They're not going to give you any feedback. It's too open-ended. But if you can ask those questions, is there something I'm doing that you wish I would do differently? And how? Well, how would you recommend I do it differently? What am I doing well that's really working for you and the team that you like and you want to see me do more of? Because I don't do it enough, but when I do it, it's good,
Mm,
right? So you give them some more descriptive questions. Um, what can I do to help you, do your job more effectively? How can I better support you? What do you need from me? So when we get more descriptive, we get more feedback. We need to understand how we're being perceived by people.
mhm.
People, if we've never asked the question before, they're not going to tell us anything, right? We have to be willing to ask that question over and over and over and over again until we build a culture that says, it's safe, right? And as you know, you and I have both taught this before. When you receive feedback, the most important thing you do is you say thank you, right? You
Exactly.
don't refute it, you don't rationalize it. You can ask some additional inquisitive questions to better understand the feedback. But most important, you share gratitude for receiving it and you let them know how it may have been uncomfortable for them and it's a little uncomfortable for you to hear it, but you're so grateful for having received it. So those would be just really key things. I want to just ask you one quick question, and just because I think it would be helpful for people to hear this. What percentage of people do you think are self-aware? Take a guess.
Oh. It's I would imagine it's pretty low. So I'm going to go with 18%.
So, Tasha Eurich is a researcher who's done so much work in this space. And what she has found pretty consistently is 95% of people tend to believe they're self aware,
Right.
but only 5 to 10% really are.
Oh, see, I knew I was high, right? Yeah,
No,
yeah.
you were perfect. You were in that lower
Yeah,
lower
lower.
quartile,
Right.
right?
Mhm.
But 95% of people, and especially leaders, this is a very leader dynamic as well. Leaders think they're self aware.
Yeah.
They sometimes we just come at the job with the level of arrogance that we don't even realize we have. But
Yes.
but more often than not, there's so much we're not seeing. We're oblivious to. We're in our own head of our own sort of narrative of how we're seen, of how we're perceived, of how great we are, and we need to get out of our head. We need to be in our head to be more aware of, the things that we do and why we do them. And, why does this trigger me? What about this situation tends to trigger me? And when I'm triggered, what are my behaviors? We need that self-reflective process. But man, we need external feedback and we need to be really good at just soliciting it from others.
Oh, we sure do. Listen, I feel like we could talk for hours, and I'm going to have you back again because I want us to have a conversation about coaching. You know, it's my passion, it's your passion. I think there's so much work that's needed in healthcare, to get us to the level where this is like organic and natural. So I definitely want to have you back. But I just have to say, like every single time I interact with you, I know that the universe sends people, us, the people that we're supposed to be working with. I just always feel that with you. Like I can just feel that. And I wish so many people had the opportunity to work alongside of you like I
Mm.
have in my past. So I wanted to just say how much I appreciate you. Um, if people want to get in touch with you, Veronica, just remind them how to do that.
I'm so bad. I don't have my own personal website or anything. But feel free just to contact me with my own personal email. So Veronica Barber, all one word, 3489 at outlook.com. So Veronica Barber, 3489 at outlook.com.
And I'll be sure to put it in the podcast description as
Yeah.
well.
Sure.
because everybody should be reaching out to you. You're such a great resource, and
Oh,
you're really going to help transform our healthcare system. So I just want to say, on behalf of you, thank you for guest hosting today. It was so wonderful, and I can't wait for us to meet again. And we're going to do it before your fall session starts, right? That is a must.
hopefully.
Because once fall happens, forget it. I'm not going to be able to get
It's
in touch with you at
so
all.
busy.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
And Arlene, I want to give you that gift of gratitude right back because I think the work that you're doing is so needed. And this is just your little side gig, your
I know.
passionate, your passionate hobby in many regards, and yet you're healing the world, right? And so you're called to do this and you're doing it. And sometimes I think those are the best leaders, not the leaders that get into leading because of power or money or whatnot. The best leaders sometimes don't want to lead, but they feel called
Yeah.
to do it. And that's 100% what I see in you. So thank you
Oh,
for the work that you do.
oh, that's so sweet. Well, listen, I enjoyed our conversation, and I hope all of you leaders out there were inspired to really look at your situation differently and listen in to a future podcast. Goodbye, everyone.